You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 266th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 868th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of September 22nd, 2022. I am your host, the coach, Brian Tonsoni. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call, how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion. Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred today at the Media Day event hosted by the Athletic Department. Both the men's and women's programs met with the media, had pictures taken, and gave us a little insight into the upcoming seasons. The banner moment, expectations. Yes, Indiana basketball is talking about expectations. The fans are talking, the media is talking, the players are talking, and even the head ball coach, Mike Woodson, is talking. Quote, Coach Woodson said, "I came back here to win Big Ten titles and a national title. I'm not going to push the team in any other direction. If they're scared of it, they shouldn't be here," end quote. Yes, we are talking expectations and talking in the right fashion about those expectations. Indiana basketball is about winning, simply winning. We have fallen short a lot lately in the winning department, but Indiana basketball is about winning. It's fine to have those expectations. Now, they need to be backed up with proper planning, execution, results, but anything less than those types of expectations is just not Indiana basketball. Today, Coach Woodson had a lot to say, but what he said about the schedule, the expectations, the freshmen, the players, is what we should want from a leader of the Indiana basketball program. So let's go. Let's root the Hoosiers on as they pursue some championships. Go get it, fellas. Okay, let me introduce my co-host this week.
Analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the answers.
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
Taking a break from massaging Justin Herbert's sore ribcage and getting off the freeway traffic, it's Ryan Phillips. Do you have a rant or rumination to share with us this week?
So the traffic part is actually true. I came through the door about 3 minutes ago. Justin Herbert, he can get somebody else to massage his rib and hopefully crack another one while they're in there. So I coach, I can't believe you didn't pick this as your banner moment. It is one of the greatest days in Indiana sports history. Beer sales at Indiana basketball games.
Let's go.
Baby. And I'll tell you what about this. They're going to sell a lot if the team is good this year. If the team is bad this year, they're going to sell twice as much. So either way, this is going to work out for the university in a big, big way. So beer sales at an Indiana sporting event, really mad that this happened years after I graduated because I was there for some bad teams, and it would have been really nice to be able to drown my sorrows in the stadium and not have to walk in the freezing cold for miles to go have to do it.
Well, beer sales are here. So are the steep stairs. Drink responsibly.
Yeah. No, there's going to be
casually.
I think they're going to have to double security.
Put some new flooring down.
Schwarber won't be the only one drinking at IU basketball games.
Absolutely. So let's go. Okay, here's what we have in store this week. We're going to do some Hoosier headlines, including some reactions to today's media festivities. And actually, we're probably going to stretch that out into segment 2. We got quite a lot to talk about. We might push back the top 25 list, which is what we were planning to do with segment 2. Inside the Hall has come out with their top 25 and plus some honorable mention. Big Ten players, if we need to, we'll get to that. If not, we'll push that back to next week. So segment 2 will be Media Day and Big Ten Top 25 if time permits. And then segment 3, as usual, we have a lot of great questions from our community members. All of that is coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio.
Home field apparel, wear one for the team.
Now it's time to talk about our presenting sponsor. This edition of Assembly Call Radio, just like all shows on the Back Home Network, is presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel, where they have the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you'll find anywhere, with beloved logos like 2 different versions of the Bison and even, yes, the Evil Oval. The bottom line is that Home Field has something for fans and grads of pretty much every school, with unique vintage logos for all of them. And no matter what you buy, you know it'll be comfortable and the colors will last through many washings. Plus, you're supporting an Indiana-based company that came up through the Kelly Business School. What could be better than that? You all know my fascination with Home Field. Can't stop. Bought another shirt last week, a nice Script Indiana in the gray T-shirt. Always look forward to their new products. So go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME for 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME, HOME, for 15% off your first order. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. And we'll just let that music play out until I can find a way to stop it. There we go.
There you go.
All right. So Media Day, Ryan, we're going to talk a lot about Media Day in particular, have some quotes from the players and from the coaches ready for us in segment 2. Media Day's good, but you also know that there's no program in the country that comes out and says we had a bad summer, our guys aren't together, we really think we're going to suck this year. So everything's rosy at this Media Day. Everything will be rosy at the Big Ten Media Days. So you got to try to find little nuances in there, and I think some of the people in the chat have already picked up on some of them. We're going to talk about some of them in segment 2, but overall thoughts, just general thoughts about Indiana's Media Day today.
I thought the most telling quotes were about Mike Woodson discussing himself and how he has to be better and how he left a couple games on the floor last year. And obviously he was listening to the assembly call, because we discussed that Mike Woodson left a few games on the floor last year by not making some changes late in games when things weren't going well. You're up by a bunch, you start to lose the lead, you need to change some things. And he kind of stubbornly stuck with some things, didn't call timeouts, was a number of times, it was about 2-3 possessions too late on timeouts to change things. But again, it was his first year, learning the college game and all of that. And I think that he maybe relied on the players a bit like he would rely on NBA players to kind of figure it out for themselves. And really the only reason that coaches in the NBA call a timeout is to draw something up. It's not to make changes. Essentially, like your finishing unit is your finishing unit, regardless of what's going on. And they rarely call timeouts to staunch momentum late in games. They'll do that early on if you're on, giving up a 12-0 run or something. They'll call a timeout and just sit everybody down. But they don't do that in towards the end of games usually. So I would say that, yeah, I think those were interesting quotes, him being very critical of himself. And that's what stood out to me. I think that Trace Jackson Davis made some comments about Logan Duncombe being a lot better and really asserting himself and potentially being a second unit center and all that. And I thought that was interesting. And Woodson, of course, has said the same thing about Trace Jackson Davis's offense that he said for a while, is that he's not restricted from shooting jump shots. He needs to be able to have the confidence to do it.
So Media Day occurred. Again, we're going to talk a lot more about some particulars from Media Day in segment 2. Some other highlights. The staff went 4 deep to visit 5-star big man Flory Badunga up here in Kokomo. They're on our schedule at Western. We played against him. We played against him last year in his first ever high school game in America. He's gotten a lot better since that first game. So we'll see about that recruitment as Badunga has just skyrocketed up the ranking systems with his play.
He's gone from like low 3-star to like a top 10 national recruit.
And I tell you, he's a rebounding machine. He's got a lot of motor. His footwork was a struggle when we played against him. It was a lot of shuffling the feet, and just his number one move was up. But he had great athleticism. He had decent form on his free throw shooting when he was in warm-ups and all of that. So I'm sure that he's really worked on developing his game. Someone Indiana should go after. They've missed out on a few big guys. It would be good to get someone like that who just is a motor guy.
So, from what we've seen, Indiana's a little late to this one. Some other people got in first. They did go deep. They think they have an angle on his recruitment. I don't know if that's true, and I don't know if they're going to get him, but this is the kind of guy you go all in on. And it's a lot of people, there were questions about whether or not you go all in on Xavier Booker. There really were. I mean, there's split decisions within the state on whether or not you go all in on that guy, even though he was ranked very highly and everything. Some people had, certain opinions of him that you don't go all in on that guy. I remember the same thing happened with Caleb Swanigan. Caleb Swanigan was, a stud in the state, and some teams stayed away from him. And I think that happened with Xavier Booker a little bit too. Benenga's not that guy. You go in on him, fully in on him. And the fact that they're a little late to this one is a little troubling, but he also didn't really blow up until recently. So some people think they have a shot. Indiana, if they're going 4 deep, Indiana clearly thinks they have a shot. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully they can sort of reel this one in.
And then Cody Zeller signs with the Utah Jazz. Cody's had a nice career in a role-playing way, signing with Utah. Utah has done a lot of things to change their roster, so I believe there were some openings, right?
It's a tankathon in Utah this year. What's going on is they're going to do what Boston did when it dumped the big three, is dump everybody, get a ton of draft picks, get a bunch of expiring contracts to open up salary cap stuff. And that's what they're dismantling that team right now and going, full tank and stockpiling draft picks. So Cody should have some opportunities to play there.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the beer sales. It's time. It's different. Yeah. And speaking of its time and it's different from this old codger, Chicago, I don't even know how I'm going to pronounce this right. How do you pronounce this rapper? G Herbo will perform at the conclusion of Hoosier Hysteria. Big name, platinum guy, good get for Indiana. The players are all fired up. Hopefully the recruits are fired up, and that's ultimately what Hoosier Hysteria is about. Not my kind of style, so I probably, as usual now, not attend Hoosier Hysteria, but those are the types of things you have to do, I believe, now to keep your players happy and to get the recruits that are there to see you as a viable place. So that was a big news headline this week about Hoosier Hysteria.
People have said, like, I saw some people online being like, who is this for? The most of the fans in Indiana have never heard it. It's for recruits.
Absolutely.
That is who it's for. That they're going to have recruits on campus. They want something cool to happen. It's for students, too. I'm sure the students will enjoy it, too.
It's homecoming week.
It's not meant for the 60-year-old fan who's going to show up or the 50-year-old fan who's going to show up with his kids or whatever. That's not what it's for anymore. It is for recruiting, and it's for the players to make it feel cool and like an atmosphere. A couple years ago, Kansas had Snoop Dogg at it. That was a big controversy and all that. But, like, it's about doing something the kids and the recruits will find interesting and make it feel like a crazy, fun atmosphere. That's what it's for. It's, Hoosier Hysteria. It's not the old Midnight Madness that we had a couple decades ago.
It sure is.
Where you literally came out and passed the ball around and ran drills and stuff. It is a show now, and it is meant to draw attention and draw recruits.
So is there going to be beer at Hoosier Hysteria?
I certainly
that may
so.
draw me. That may draw me in, even though I don't listen to the rap music, but I do drink the beer. So maybe it's 50-50. But there's some good headlines. Things are moving in good directions in Bloomington. So we're getting close. We're getting real close. So coming up here on Assembly Call Radio, we're going to talk more about media days, some quotes, what they mean, and what you might read between the lines. So stick with us. All right, welcome everyone. We got a good group here in the chat mob. Thank you for being here. Indiana football is 3-0. Basketball holds media days. Lots of things going on.
Yeah. And finally, it feels like we're finally getting to football. or I mean to basketball.
Yeah.
Getting out of getting out of the football area.
It seems the off seasons are just so long anyway for us when we're fans, but now when we do shows like this too, the need for creative content and just to talk about sometime. Brian Toohey brings up something too. The headline: Bo Borowski has hung it up. He's got a business venture attached to officiating, and everyone gives Bo a hard time because I think you can remember his name. But Bo was all right, despite sometimes what we thought. And congratulations to Bo on his retirement. So
I will say this about Bo. In a consistent way, he wasn't as bad as others, but he was in the middle of a lot of bad calls, like big bad calls at big moments. And not regular, not every time he played, but it was, there were times where like it'd be a game-changing call. It just so happened that Bo was the official right next to where it happened.
Yeah. So anyway, we're real close to starting to get on those officials again. That's always a good thing. So we're gonna hit some media days. If you have some questions in the chat, and I can keep track of them here, we'll try to answer them. I think there's some really good things to come out of it. Again, take it with a grain of salt because everyone's going to be positive. The real deal is the eye test when we see them start to play, and even be careful of the evaluations at Hoosier Hysteria because it's just a show. Any scrimmaging they may or may not do there is going to be light for injury purposes and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't do a scrimmage
forward
last year.
Yeah.
I don't think they did they do a scrimmage last year?
I think it was just the competitions.
Yeah, they were short too many players, right?
Yeah. They had some injury things, I think. That's right.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back to the assembly call. I'm the coach, Brian Tonsoni. I'm joined tonight with Ryan Phillips. Jared Morris may be with us here by the end of the show. We have a couple of big topics that we're ready to talk about. We may talk about both of them. We may just talk about media days and push the top 25 from inside the hall back to another time. I know Alex Bozich was going to be with us tonight. I think he has confirmed for next week, so that would be a good topic to maybe save for Alex for next week. But Ryan, I have these broken up into segments and just want to get your thoughts and then I will comment on these. But my banner moment was about expectations. I thought some of the best things in reading the transcript today of Coach Woodson's remarks was you want a leader to not back away from expectations. And there's difference between reality. You could have expectations and not have the team. Indiana has an opportunity possibly this year to meet those expectations, but you do want to try to win championships. You don't want to put the mark too low. Your thoughts today on how Coach Woodson approached those questions about expectations?
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself.
That's all right.
It was for your benefit, actually. No, I think that he answered them head on, and he said, you know what, every year I have expectations, and that's kind of the standard coach answer. But then he talked about, look, we've got a great schedule that's going to challenge us, and then you got the Big Ten, so we're doing the things that you should do if you're a top level program. Essentially, this is reading between the lines is what I was hearing from him. And that it's nice to be recognized because some of these guys have been here for 4 years and haven't been ranked. They don't feel like they've been ranked, and now they're ranked, and have a good have a good feeling about where they are. Now we just got to go perform. And, right. Rankings don't matter. He even mentioned that his senior year, they were ranked number 1 and didn't win the national championship. So rankings don't matter a whole lot. But it was just interesting to hear his perspective on that. Now that there are expectations, I think expectations last year were very low heading into the season. It was like first season with a new coach. Yeah, you've got Trace, but, you got to make the tournament. But other than that, there's really no expectations. He enters this year with a lot of expectations because of who came back and who they added and all of that. So it is the big, elephant in the room is the fact that they got to win this year. I I mean, if they don't, they're going to be losing a lot of guys, quite frankly, next year. And you've got to make some hay this year to establish that the program is actually back. And if they don't, it's going to be a very uncomfortable offseason, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, and the bottom line is nice reading between the lines again, because a lot of this is coach speak and player speak and all positive. But we're in year 2 talking about these expectations, and he's being asked questions about these expectations. That's a sign that the program moved ahead faster than most of us expected. That's a positive sign. And then you don't back down from it. The line at the end is like, don't be scared of trying to win. And you talk, if you study a lot of the solid coaches, they all have some sort of motto or method. Some say it publicly, but a lot of them keep it in the locker room. When Northwestern turned around their program, it was expect victory inside the locker room on their T-shirts and everything. And so you have to set expectations and goals high enough in your program. But it's one thing to be able to do that when people take you seriously. And Indiana basketball is being taken seriously again. That's what I think this conversation was all about. So let's talk about Xavier Johnson. He was asked about the possible discipline from the spring arrest, and he was quoted as saying, "Well, that's all behind us. He's gotten through that process. He would have to do some community service. X has grown a lot based on the thing he's done this summer. He's put himself in a wonderful position with me being the coach that I like everything about what X is doing now because he's doing the right things on and off the court. He doesn't have a vehicle anymore. I took that away from him." That's going to be a topic. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it other places, people having some sort of opinion on what seems like will not be a suspension for Xavier Johnson. Your thoughts on that comment from Coach Woodson today?
No, I think it's funny they took away his vehicle and appropriate punishment. I would say you have lost your right to have that vehicle. But yeah, I mean, look, we've debated whether or not he'd get a 1-game suspension or not, and it appears not. Just based on those quotes, it feels like he's this was an off-season punishment type situation. But yeah, I mean, look, if X has grown up a lot, we saw X mature on the court throughout the year last year. I think early on he was reacting to every official's call. He was talking to opponents the entire time. He was allowing himself to get emotional. And, if he got beat on defense, he immediately went down and took a shot. I mean, you could just set your watch by it, that he was not going to pass. He was going to put the ball up. And you also found a situation where he would, if he got one foul or if he missed a shot, he might just foul immediately on the next day. And over the season, we saw him sort of become a leader and really change that. And you saw Mike Woodson pull him aside and bench him sometimes early in the season and tell him, hey, you can't do that. You're the point guard. So we saw him mature very rapidly, I think, on the court. And it appears that Mike Woodson feels like he's done it off the court now. So I hope so. Certainly, what he was involved in, you can't do that, and you can't be driving that fast in a small town like that on roads where a drunk college kid could easily be crossing the street and be there for you to hit him. And he's lucky nothing like that happened. So hopefully he's realized his mistake and grown up and isn't going to do anything like that again. In a golf cart, because he's clearly not getting a car for a while.
Yeah, and the thing that I will share between the lines too is, people are going to say he should be, and I think we have a question in segment 3 about what that means going forward for discipline. You got to trust your head coach, and the evaluation, Ryan, comes if something happens again or the emotions aren't mature and he hasn't grown. Then we could go back and say, was the discipline effective? But until you see some results one way or the other, and hopefully positive, you got to trust the leader of the program. And not every situation automatically requires a game or 2 games. There's different philosophies out there in the coaching world. Sometimes I adopted this late in my coaching career that why punish the whole team in this situation, when one person acted, it wasn't like, not closing out or not blocking out. Other people would say if one person of the team messes up, the whole team messes up. So there's two different philosophies on there. But I would run kids. I would make them get up at 4 a.m. and do some community service. There are other ways to have discipline or / punishment, as people sometimes call for, than just simply a game. And sometimes it was mentioned here in the chat. I think Ari said that something like taking away the car, or you're not allowed to have a car on campus if you're going to play for me, is probably sometimes more effective than sitting against some of the 2 games we have early in the season. So, and plus other players depend on X for their success and their individual awards and their team awards as well. So I think that hopefully that's over with, and it's over with because X is a better person. That's the number one reason we want it over with. And then also it's just one of the few negatives in the Woodson era that we've had to talk about. And if it is over, we can focus on, baskets going in and blockouts and all those kinds of things. So obviously he's going to be talking about shooting. We've talked about that in a lot. He brought up the point that he believed they got good shots last year and just missed them. That's been the last 3 or 4 years where people have gotten good shots and just missed them. The between the lines thing that I picked out from this, Ryan, was that they're really – I don't know if they brought in anyone who's just going to increase the shooting, but they're counting on development. And so the proof is going to be in the pudding for me. The shots go in, the percentages go up. We have more success because of three-point shooting, but it seems like he believes Race and he believes TJD are better shooters, and Miller Kopp's going to have a year under his belt. The comments he made about that, they're really hoping that every player develops better three-point shooting, and obviously that's just the way I think it has to be given who they recruited. Thoughts on any comments about his three-point shooting? Remarks?
He didn't mention Tamar Bates, but Tamar Bates is a guy who's got to shoot it better.
Right.
I mean, if you're going to be playing, you got to shoot it better. And a guy like Jalen Hood-Schifino, we haven't seen him, but if you look at his numbers from high school, he wasn't a great three-point shooter. You could hit him, but he wasn't a great three-point. He's got to be able to hit some, but they're going to play off of him. Trey Galloway's got to find a way to shoot the ball. Like, he didn't mention everybody, and I didn't expect him to run through the entire roster because, quite frankly, if you're running through the entire roster of guys who can't shoot on this team, it's going to take a while. But he mentioned, Race Thompson, sort of the second half of the year, he started making some shots from deep and started shooting it more confidently and hit some big ones for Indiana. Xavier Johnson really became a good three-point shooter in the second half of last season, which, in spite of his funky mechanics, he actually did become a better shooter. So I don't know. I think that it's the big question mark of this team, and it's been the big question mark in Indiana basketball for the better part of a decade. Who's going to hit shots? And, the answer has been pretty much no one for a while, and it needs to get better this year. If you have these lofty expectations, I don't care how much talent you have on the team, you got to be able to knock down shots in the modern college basketball to win games.
And staying with that theme of shooting, I think some of us on here, I think both of us for sure, have talked about stretching the floor, spacing being important in the college game. And traditionally in the last 3 or 4 years, we've had heavy post presence that had to score at the rim. You had 2 or 3 guys on the court. A lot of times in the Archie Miller era, in Woodson's first year, where you had to get those guys opportunities in the low post, or you had to get them opportunities offensive rebounding. We've talked about stretching the floor. So they brought up shooting and Trace, and we're going to talk about Trace playing the 4 because that was kind of brought up, another thing that we need to try to address tonight, I believe. But Coach Woodson was talking about he wants Trace to be able to shoot it. He's given him the green light. But the line that made a lot of sense to me, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on this, was he said, everybody looks at this thing where he's got to be a three-point shooter. I think if he makes a 15 to 17-foot shot, it's just as effective. That's kind of how I look at it. That was Coach Woodson, a quote from Coach Woodson. Your thoughts on I liked that. I thought that was a really solid comment. Explain, you're a shot doctor, explain where if he could at least hit the 15 to 17-footer, that helps Indiana. Obviously, a three-point shooter, TJD, also helps, but at least being able to hit that 15 to 17-footer, why would Coach Woodson think that's equally effective?
Because it means that a guy can't Kofi Kingston him. A guy can't sit 6 feet off of him when he's at the free throw line and just wait for him to post up and play into a bigger guy's hands. He has to guard him out there, which, by the way, opens up something on the baseline for somebody else. You can lob it over the top to somebody. You can pass around your guy. You can cut baseline. You can do that. It opens up the floor a little bit. If there's a big guy stapled under the basket defensively, it limits what you can do offensively. Plus, if he does that again, like he's just harder to guard. And the defense has to respect it, and the defense has to step up, just like they have to step out to the three-pointer. Now, you want to space it all the way out to three with everybody if you can. That's not feasible in college, I don't think. In the NBA, it's more feasible. But you're not going to have all 5 guys on the floor being able to shoot that often in college basketball. But I will say that I think that he's absolutely right, that if you can shoot that jumper, it changes the spacing of the defense. It changes what the offense can do, and it changes your angles of attack as an offense too. You get it to the free throw line. You can have guys cut off that from the wings. You can have guys backdoor. You can, backdoor screen for guys, or you can have the other big guy run in and post up underneath and do a high-low situation. So, and again, if TJD's on the floor, he's going to have the biggest guy on the floor on him. The 4, if it's Race Thompson, might have a shorter guy, might have more of a wing guarding him. You throw it in, Race might have a mismatch. So, he's absolutely right that if he could even shoot anything outside of a 5-footer, it helps Indiana tremendously.
And interesting, TJD brings up, and we're really going to get to the players here at the back end of this segment. TJD brought up, I think he brought up, or maybe no, it was Coach Woodson. At the end of this quote, he said the biggest shots of the season for TJD was in the Big Ten tournament against Illinois when he faced up Kofi and he hit the jump shot. And that was a reason that, in that game, those Big Ten tournament games in the second half of Michigan and then the game against Illinois and Iowa, he was dominant. So he adds more than just the left-handed low post or the alley-oop dunk or the fast break run out. Now he can hit that 15 to 17-footer. That gives him more options individually. It helps the team. But that right there is exactly what you were talking about with his ability to face up. I want to go back to your opening comment, if I can, and I pulled the quote from him on his improvement, and I thought this was one of the better press conferences transcripts I've read of Coach Woodson. And there's been some that I've kind of wondered, what is he saying? Where is he going with this? But I thought this one was a really good, and maybe it shows some of this improvement that we've talked about. But I really appreciate a head coach of the program that I root for saying, I've got to get better. Because if you say that as a leader and then you demand your players to say that, I just think that's just really important. And we've talked about subbing and timeouts and all of that stuff. But I'm just going to ask you, how much is it the mental side of having that approach? And if you communicate that with your players, you did a good job of talking about the end of the games and how he's got to be better there. And we can all go the details, but I think this sends a signal to the team of being hungry and getting better, and I think that's going to help. What are your thoughts on when he just starts out saying, I have got to get better, I always put pressure on myself, and try to take some of it off the players?
Well, I think that in some ways it makes it so they're all in it together. I mean,
right.
The players got to get better, but the coach has to get better. It's a team effort. It's not just, hey, I'm putting you in a position to succeed. You go do it. It's a team effort. I think that the players have to feel that and understand that and know that. And I think he did a really good job of articulating that he's just as responsible for winning as they are. So that's what I took from it.
And you mentioned this too. I think you always look at each year as you just got fired and you're taking over a program. That's what I learned from some coach, that if you approach every season with you're a brand new coach, what does this program need? You're going to improve that program. I thought that came across in his comments today. He talked about the freshmen and the age-old question. I don't know that anything he said shows me that he's really going to throw them out there a lot of minutes. He kind of said they have to be ready, and they've had some good moments. He told a story about them struggling against the veterans. Did you read anything in there that says we're going to see more of the freshmen in any role or not?
Yeah, he just said they're up and down, and that's quite
Which
frankly
they are.
Yeah, which is what you expect. As the old quote goes, the best thing about freshmen is they become sophomores. So, I don't expect anything different. I think the key is going to be getting them into game action early, and the ones you want to play, get them in there, get them some minutes because you're going to need them later in the year, and you want them to build up some confidence early on. I mean, even if you got to play a couple of them like 3 to 5 minutes against Kansas, just get them in there. Get them into a big game. To feel that atmosphere, feel what it's like, so that if you need somebody for an injury down the road, it's not foreign to them. It's not an alien concept to walk into the Breslin Center and play. You feel like you've felt that before. I just think that the key with the freshmen, and they are up and down, and I think he needs to not be frustrated by the fact that they're up and down, because that's the nature of the beast with freshmen. And I just think, and I harped on it last year, I harped on it early in the season, and it didn't come true, and I'm going to harp on it again. You have offered these kids scholarships to come play at Indiana University. You need to trust them at some point and get them in the game. Play them. That's the only way they're going to get better, is by playing. You can practice all you want. There, coach, you will back me up on this as a coach. There is nothing like game action to improve somebody. Game action against a real opponent to improve somebody.
Yeah, and a lot of coaches know that. And it's a struggle, too, because it's hard to play more than 8. But if you don't get 9 or 10 in some significant minutes, they're never going to be able to push your program. That it is a constant struggle. But absolutely, there's nothing like game, because you just can't replicate atmosphere. You can't replicate the speed,
adrenaline,
the opponents that you play for.
It's like when a kid comes in his first game in college and he takes a 3-point shot, I 100% expect it to go over the rim.
Right. You're just jacked up.
Because there's nothing like it. And then they calm down. That's why I always say you got to see a shot go down, because it calms everything. And so I just feel like it's like a quarterback completing his first college pass or something like that. It calms everything down. When a backup quarterback comes in, perfect example, backup quarterback comes in, first string quarterback gets hurt, you bring in the backup quarterback. They almost always throw a screen or a real quick pass or something just to get them to feel confident and calm. It's the same with basketball. You got to make a shot. You got to maybe make a play on defense, something that gets you into the game. If we can accomplish that for these guys in November, then you don't have to worry about doing it in January and February, where you're going to have to get a couple minutes from some of them.
I agree, and I think that's something for us that we're going to watch, and I think a lot of our followers are going to watch too, how he handles and how he substitutes in the minute allocation of the freshmen. But I'm a big believer, get your best players in, get them in, and get your younger kids in. I think the game of basketball, Ryan, is a guards game and a youth game. If you're going to go far in a tournament, do you want to get old and stay old? Love that. But your older guys are more of your glue guys. In our situation, we have a really good old guy in TJD who's going to be dominant, which is a luxury. But a lot of times your better players are going to be your youthful players, depending on how strong you're recruiting. But you got to get your young guys in. And we got young guys from established high school programs that are coming in that are more ready than normal high school players. You've got to live with their ups and downs, as he said, a little bit more. And I think maybe we're hopeful thinking, I'm reading between the lines, he's aware of that, because he said he's got to push them a little bit more and get them ready. There's been some comments there. The last thing from Coach Woodson is he called Miller Kopp a true pro, very coachable. I needed to hear that, because I think I'm a little tough on Miller Kopp, to be honest with you. I know he played with a tough foot injury and gutted it out instead of taking some time off. But the key thing that he said that I saw got a lot of play on social media and stuff was he thought Miller Kopp was one of their better perimeter defenders. And I think there's some reason why he might have said that. I think you thought he was a pretty good defender. I might have disagreed with you on his defense, but obviously Coach Woodson's on your side. He thinks he was a good defender. Your thought on what he said about Miller Kopp, and that's another thing that we're going to be watching. Does he start? What minutes does he get? That's been a hot debate in the offseason.
Yeah, and Miller, what I want to say of Miller, I didn't think he was a good perimeter defender. I thought he improved tremendously from what we saw at the beginning of the season to what we saw towards the end of the season. And so you're almost grading on a curve there and saying like, hey,
right,
he's not the hole in the defense.
His effort was fantastic 100%. On defense. Like he never stopped trying on defense.
Yeah, no, there are physical limitations there, just like there were physical limitations for Parker Stewart's,
right.
Just didn't have quick feet. And you're going to get beat repeatedly when that happens. And honestly, the coaches should not put you in a position where they're relying on your feet to be fast if you are that guy. No, I think Miller really got better defensively. I think at Northwestern, he probably didn't have to be a good defender because all he was there to do was make a ton of shots. And in Indiana, you got to do it all if you're going to be a contending team. And so I thought he got better. I think that I agree that I think that what I've heard about Miller, he's a veteran. He is a true guy who works hard, does what he's supposed to do. The results were not there offensively last year. We saw what he's capable of a few times.
And he needs to be this year, or someone else is going to play.
Exactly. And that Syracuse game, you saw, okay, that's what Miller Kopp could do. That's what they brought him in to do. And it wasn't consistent. And it wasn't consistently there offensively. And I think that as a shooter, he got into his own head. And he was overshooting everything and trying too hard. And when that happens, the shots don't go down. You need to shoot without thinking. And it has to be a natural feel. That said, you're right. He's got to make shots this year because there are guys breathing down his neck to take those minutes. And I have a hard time seeing him starting. And I actually think some of the best he played last year was he was on the second unit and being able to spread the floor on the second unit a little bit. Because even when he's not making at 40%, defenses know he can make it. So he does stretch the floor. I mean, they have to cover him. They know they have to cover him, even if he's not hitting, because he has that reputation. Just like Parker Stewart. Parker Stewart would go 0 for 7 in a game, but they're still guarding him at the three-point line. That
How about
for everyone else.
Super sub, Vinny Johnson, microwave, come in and just jack some threes up at the 12, 13-minute mark with the second unit against the other team's second unit where they can't guard you as well. So sometimes you don't have to be a starter to be effective.
Make him the sixth man. Make him the guy that comes in when things don't start well, and he can kind of calm the waters and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows the offense. He's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to defend. He knows the game inside and out. Maybe he's that guy that's the calming influence when things aren't going well. Hopefully he can be that guy. Last year, that guy kind of was Xavier Johnson towards the end of the year. Yep. And when things were going haywire, you put X in there. He controls the ball, controls the way things are going. He gets the ball in the post. He was a good interior passer, and he can make some shots. So, I remember once, the game against Wisconsin that we try and pretend didn't happen. And I really, as I said at the time, I hope that plane ride home was sucked. But Xavier Johnson in the second half of that game went like 1 of 9 because he kept driving and trying to make things happen. And he was doing that because nobody else was doing anything. And people were hating on Xavier Johnson for missing shots, but he had to do something because nobody else would. And I think at the end of the year, you saw what he was doing and you look back at that game and you see it much differently than you did at the time because he was trying to lead and get guys energized to do things when they were doing absolutely nothing offensively. And I think guys like Kopp, guys like Johnson, they're going to be relied upon. I mean, Trace Jackson-Davis, obviously, but the other guys are going to be relied upon to fill some of those gaps when things don't go well because inevitably things aren't going to go well at some point, and you're going to need guys to step up and fill those gaps.
And here's where the chat mob is probably right. I think Miller's going to start regardless of what you and I think because I think Woody likes veterans. I think that's a little pro background. Start your veteran players and ease your rookies in. That's a mentality that he has. So if I were a betting man, I'd probably say Miller starts. But I'm talking about what I would maybe do. Right? We'll have to see once the season starts. So now let's talk about a couple player comments here. Stretching out segment 2. Your guy Race Thompson loved this today. Thought it was awesome. He said a lot of good things, but the one quote I pulled. The question was, if you didn't see the transcript, if you're listening, Race, how do you want to be remembered by your coaches and teammates in your time at IU? And Race Thompson answers this way, quote, just a great teammate and someone who would do anything to win a game. I mean, that's all I could ask for, just a good teammate, good friend, good all that, all the good stuff, that's really it. If that's not what we see when Race Thompson's going good. I know he had a little bad stretch at the end of the year, but what we've seen when he's on the court for the most part is that glue guy, that hustle guy, that block shots, that dive on the floor. I just thought that was an absolute excellent thing for someone to say, that, you know, being a good teammate is a skill. And I think Race has probably mastered it. Your thoughts on your boy, Race Thompson?
That's a Race Thompson answer. It is. I mean, it's he does everything for the team. He gives more effort than anybody, quite frankly. Not that other guys don't give good effort, but he gives more. He's like everybody else and then some is the way I'd talk about Race Thompson. And he does everything on the floor. I think at times, and I said last year, and Jared, after months, finally conceded it, he was the most important player on the floor for Indiana pretty much all season, until that last stretch of like 5 games where he really struggled. And I think that the minutes got to him. I really do think the minutes got to him and he wore down. But until those last 5 games, he was Indiana's most important player. Not their best player, but their most important player. And I think we're headed for that again this year. And quite frankly, I said it on Twitter after, you know, when we were still learning whether or not Trace Jackson-Davis would come back. I said, if Trace Jackson-Davis goes pro and Race Thompson comes back, I think he is a legitimate candidate for Big Ten Player of the Year. He won't put up the numbers Trace does, but he does everything on the floor in a Draymond Green sort of way.
Impact guy.
Impacts the game on both ends of the floor and can score. You know, and if he was, I think his ideal situation in this scenario would be the back to the basket 5 who could step out, but the back to the basket 5. And if he's doing that, he can score. And we've seen him score. And if Trace isn't there to take those minutes, you know, he might put up bigger numbers. But when Trace decided to come back, I'm sure Race was thrilled, because he gets to be himself. He gets to be that guy who is just sort of the garbage man, can do everything. He can switch down to the 5. He can step out on the floor. He can play the 2-man high-low game with Trace. Can sub for him when Trace, you know, sits out. I just think that he's one of those guys, when you look at his career, the numbers may not be there as like a great, but he's been, in my opinion, one of the best players of this era, of this last, you know, 5.
He's so easy to root for. He's just so easy to root for,
man.
Yes.
And, you know, especially when you consider his numbers would be better if not for that concussion, if not for some of the freak injuries he suffered. You know, one where he went up for a rebound against, I think it was Michigan State, I don't remember, landed on his hip and was out for a while. I mean, like, freak injuries, but like all the time when he was doing that, he was contributing when he wasn't out. And I think we saw last year what he's fully capable of when he's playing full time, and was outstanding and one of the best players. I think one of the, you know, I thought he should have been on an all Big Ten team, but I mean, Indiana, you know, their record probably took that away from him. But he's a guy who impacts every game. And a lot of times you'll hear the opposing coaches talk about him in their post-game press conferences. And that means a lot.
You mentioned a little high-low 2-man game between Race and TJD. Both guys mentioned Logan Duncombe as playing a lot better, and TJD even kind of hinted upon, I don't know if he actually said it, but that when he responded to his shooting, that he might even be playing the 4 a little bit, because Duncombe and Renault could play the 5. Your thoughts on TJD at the 4 and our man Logan Duncombe? Is he going to get more run than we expected?
He better. I mean, quite frankly, he better, because guess what? Next year, all you got coming back is Renault and Logan Duncombe up front. So you really need that. I mean, they struck out on some recruits that they really wanted to go at. You know, I don't expect them to get anybody else this year. Maybe a transfer, but as far as the high school recruits, I think they completely struck out. And I'm not sure if anyone will be available in the spring. I mean, you're banking on something crazy happening there for that to happen. But he better be, you know, start to. And we watched his high school film. His high school film, he looks like a guy who can play. He looks like
the high school coaches in Cincinnati raved about him. That I know. That I called.
He didn't have the body. He didn't have the
Right.
body when he hit campus to play in the Big Ten. And hopefully that has changed over this year. I mean, we'll be getting glimpses of him, but, you know, you'll see if you can look however you want. If you're not standing up to the punishment, then it doesn't really matter. So I would say, yeah, he's got to step up this year. And if he doesn't, they're going to find a transfer to replace him.
Here's the other thing outside the coach and player speak that I think you can read into today's comments about that. We talked about TJD hitting 15, 17-footers. When he and Race are on the floor, they're interchangeable. That one can go low post, one can go out and shoot 15, 17, or three-point. If Renault and those guys can play the 5, then TJD. It means that they're the post, the inside game is going to be you got depth, foul trouble, all of those things. You're in a better situation than you were last year with Durr and everything else. So, I'm not looking at it like he's going to play the 4. I'm hoping that it means that they're all interchangeable. If we're playing TJD at the 4 because we just want to help him get to the pros, there's some good things about that, but it reminds me of the Randall L. move to wide receiver to get him to the pros. That didn't work. Then you had to move him back to the quarterback. Coach Woodson's going to use players where they're most effective to win for Indiana. I am guaranteed of that. But I really read between the lines that our post players have a little bit of inside-outside game. I think Renault can hit the 12 to 15-footer. I know Duncombe can shoot. I don't know consistently percentage-wise, but I think you're starting to see the move of Indiana to 4s and 5s that can stretch the floor a little bit. I think that's a good thing. Ryan, last thing before we break for our question segment. I like this from TJD today, too, that he talked about his legacy, and he said a lot, but the quote I'm going to pull out, he said, winning is a big thing here. So winning the national championship and winning the Big Ten title, those are my 2 main goals this year. I think that speaks a lot to TJD's acceptance of a leadership role at the back end of last year and really this year with what he's doing with X, some of the comments he's made all around. I know that's player speak. I know they've been coached at media days to say those things. But I really get the sense maybe that this is TJD, the leader. How important is that to have a player like TJD be a positive and a take-charge leader?
It's big because statistically he will finish incredibly well. I mean, there's a decent chance he is the first player in Indiana history with 2,000 points and 1,000 rebounds. Or maybe I don't know if it's he could get 1,000. I think 1,000 rebounds and 2,000 points. That's pretty remarkable. Anytime you're the first person to do something at Indiana like that, that's a big deal. And so, the fact that he's not focused on that and wants to win and wants to be the guy that leads this team forward. And we saw him do it last year at the end of the year, maybe for the first time. We saw him really take over games. I mean, he'd taken over games before, but really consistently take over games for a stretch and just not let the team lose. And it was inspiring to watch. I mean, the kid really put it on the line, put his body on the line, and helped them win. So I think it's great to hear him speak in that way and speak about other players and speak about what he thinks this team can do. And not be and you never expect Trace to be focused on the individual, but the individual is going to come if this team is playing well.
Absolutely. A player-led team is always better than a 100% coach-led team. Obviously, the coach is going to influence basketball programs across the country, but when players take it upon themselves to clean up the locker room, hold people accountable, make sure people work hard, be vocal leaders, be leaders by example, that component then frees up the coach to do a lot of other things rather than be the emotional leader and all of that stuff too. And TJD, to me, seems like he is really stepping up in that area. So those are our thoughts on Media Day. We tried to pull out some in-between-the-lines stuff rather than just the coach and player speak. Stick with us for Q&A after this break. All right, we just got 3 or 4 questions. We'll hit those and go. There was something I think in the chat that someone asked. You were answering the page thing, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything I'm hearing is he's not going to.
Same with me.
It feels like they basically picked him over Booker to go after hard, and swung and missed. And it just feels like he's I've heard Cincinnati and USC are in the driver's seat for him. I don't know if that's what ends up happening, but look, an 18-year-old kid can change his mind any day, but the momentum is not in Indiana's favor, and it feels like they're stuck chasing transfers, which again, we've talked about it, and it was mentioned.
It's a new option.
Well, it was mentioned in the chat. This year's portal is expected to be crazy and loaded with good talent. But you are chasing an unknown there. Whereas a high school thing, you've built the relationship over years, and you're recruiting in that way. Portal is fast, and guys land somewhere for a million reasons, and so you're banking on a chance that you get something. And this recruiting class, I think 2023, I can classify it. It's not done yet. There's still spring things, or maybe somebody reclassifies, but 2023 class has been a disappointment. Yeah, I mean, they got Cups, they got Newton, but it's been a disappointment. There was talent on the board, and a lot of people have been making excuses. Well, the talent's not as good this year. Well, guess what? Everybody else signed guys, and I mean, other people seem to feel pretty good about the people they signed, and it seemed like the guys they went all in on, a lot of the guys they went all in on, they didn't get, and that is a red flag. I'm not saying it's the end of the world. I'm not saying that it's going to drag the program down or any of that, but I'm saying this was a bad recruiting cycle, and it needs to get better. They need to be better. And 24 and 25, they really need to show more effort. Some of the people involved need to do better. And, because recruiting is the lifeblood of a program. It's as important as player development. And you look at the teams that win national championships every single year.
They're consistent in recruiting.
They recruit well. You look at
Save that, because I think that's question number one coming up. So, all right, here we go for our third segment.
Hey, it's Romeo Langford. What's the only thing better than hitting a game winner to beat Wisconsin? Celebrate it with friends afterwards. Join Jarrett, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back. I'm the coach, Brian Tonsoni, here with Ryan Phillips, and it's now time for our mailbag, where all questions were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community. If you're interested in that, you can learn more about it and join. Go to assemblycall.com/community and join us there. There's always some good conversations there. So we had two recruiting questions, and in between segments, Ryan was talking about some of the recruiting things, and I want you, Ryan, to hit up on those again here. Tony D'Angelo says, I know it's early, but I was looking at 247 recruiting for 2024, and all of IU's offers, not one of them is listed as warm interest. All show cool. Is that a concern? Seems like recruiting mojo is slowing down a bit. Also heard the 23-24 classes aren't great, so maybe there is a greater strategy in play. Just curious to what you guys are hearing. That was followed up by this question, Ryan. J.D. DeFries says, IU potentially has its highest expectation season coming in somewhere between 7 and 10 years. Why does it seem like some fans are more worried about future recruiting classes than the upcoming season? Is he off base in thinking that if there's success this year, recruiting will pick back up?
Well,
those are two kind of contrasting questions there. Go ahead and share your thoughts on recruiting.
Let me answer the first one. The cool and warm interest on 24/7 Sports is not scientific. It's, and also they don't update those a lot. They're probably very focused on the 23 class right now and just haven't updated, that stuff. And also the cool and warm interest, they don't have a line into a recruit's brain to like what level of interest he has. I would say, no, it's not a concern. The concern is whether or not they can get the guys. And we don't know yet. We're not that deep into the class yet. That recruiting is going to pick up right about now. And it'll continue through about April. You want to get those guys on campus, hopefully for Hoosier Hysteria, and show them what the thing is. As far as the classes in 23 and 24 not being great, I get that, but those guys are all going to play college basketball and they're going to be on other teams. And so maybe if all of college basketball is recruiting from the same pool, you want to get the best guys from that pool, no matter if they're down or up or whatever. That's 2 years worth of players. You need to get them. And so I've heard this across the board. Well, the 23 class isn't that good. Well, guess what? In 2 years, they're all going to be starting in the NCAA tournament. If they're not that good, they're not that good for everybody, and you want to get the best of those guys. So, that comment, besides, when these guys get on campus and have real college development, it's about talent level. And if the talent level's there, it'll be elevated. And the reason people are saying the 23 class isn't good is because they missed out on a year of development. Well, whoever develops their players the best will get the best out of those players. It's not like there aren't good players in those classes. So I hate when people make that as an excuse. And usually the people saying that are the ones who are rooting for teams that did not do well in recruiting. People who are rooting for Duke or Kentucky or whatever aren't saying, well, it's a garbage class. We got a bunch of 5-stars, but they stink. It's just not a thing. And I think that, yeah, maybe these guys aren't on the level of in the past because they did miss out on some development time. But at the same time, whoever takes advantage of developing these guys the fastest is going to have a massive payoff. As for the other one, I think that you can be concerned about both things. I've said it. I'm very optimistic about this season. I'm not optimistic about the way the recruiting is going. I'm not. And to all those people who say to me, well, if you win, the recruits come. There's no guarantee of that. Tom Crean won big and had garbage classes at times. There were years where he won big and had a garbage class. I mean, it's, that idea doesn't exist in college basketball anymore when there are 100 options for schools that are all going to be on national television. There's NIL now. Kids go for any number of reasons, including relationships with coaches, which is probably number one above winning, is a relationship with a coaching staff. The ones who build the best relationships with players, the ones who get the best recruits. And I would say also, facilities, NIL, all of these things play into it. It's not just going to be, well, let's see who won the Big Ten. Okay, that's where I'm going. That's not how recruiting works, and it never has been. Winning is great. Purdue won Big Ten titles, and they weren't getting 5-stars. They were still getting guys in the same rankings they've been. They're really good at developing players, but they weren't getting they haven't gotten top level players that are going to the NBA and dominating. I mean, it's not happening. So it's not just about winning. Yeah, they're not going to go to a program that, is in the tank, but they're also, winning a Big Ten title doesn't guarantee you're getting 5-stars or the best players.
I understand where you're coming from. I take a little different approach. I talked about it last week. I'm in a wait-and-see type of situation. Obviously, when you lose out on some of the top ones and they're in your top 2 or 3, that sets you up for a little disappointment. Do I think it's going super well? No, I agree with you there. But I'm more of a wait and see, because sometimes you find a hidden gem that's ranked 88th or 89th that no one thinks is going to be good, and they like you said, the development is there too. So
development is just as important as getting the talent.
So you do need to get some of the top guys in. But he's had 2 years where he's done that. He's gotten some guys in. The question is, does he play them? Does he develop them? Can he continue to get those types of guys? I like the pipeline at Mount Verde. I know he's got 2 or 3 guys from Mount Verde wanting to come in for visits. I don't know that he'll get all of them, but that is a great pipeline if you can get that connection, because those kids are better prepared playing at a in-between college and high school type level, in my opinion. So I'm more of a wait and see. It obviously would be a lot better if we had more we hit on the guys. I think that's an honest truth. And to JD's question, I do think you can be excited about this year and concerned about the future, because you want this year's feeling every single year. And if you stop recruiting or you miss out on everyone 2 or 3 years in a row, then we're going to be back to the lower expectations that this conversation tonight has been. So I think you can be worried about both. I'm not worried in a grand sense, other than I wish it was better, but I'm more wait and see than a lot of people. Jeffrey Greider says, asked this, read that the incident with X was behind us now. So how will that play out for possible future incidents? How do coaches handle discipline? Is there a good prescribed way, or is there not? Does one discipline decision often affect others, or does it depend on the people, the program, a lot of other factors?
Well, it depends on what happens, what it is, when it happens. I mean, there's, none of them are created equally. And so it looks like this is something that was handled in the off season. I think that it would be different if it happened in season, certainly. But yeah, I think he says he's been pretty hard on him. And if it's behind him, that means they handle it in the off season. And but I think if the same incident happens during the season, I think we're seeing a much different result. I think you're missing game time. I think you're doing all this stuff. So I don't know how it'll play into future events, but we've seen how Mike Woodson handles things. He suspended some guys last year a couple different times, and from what we heard, he threw guys out of practice at times and things like that. So we'll see. We're still learning him as a coach, quite frankly. It hasn't been that long. So we'll see how he develops in that arena.
Jeffrey, I said in the show that I think you got to trust the coach, and I think you have to. I do think there's a legitimate question that a violation of curfew was 5 quick suspensions the next day, and yet something in my mind that was potentially a lot more dangerous is not getting the same discipline. But I go back to answer that question that I'm trusting Coach Woodson understands that and has decided to do something different to get the point across, and you have to trust your leaders. If it turns out that another incident happens and all of a sudden you were seeing a lot of undisciplined decisions by basketball players under Mike Woodson, then you might be able to go back to this one and say, he should have maybe done something different, set the tone, or he wasn't consistent early on. But I think you have to let that play out and trust your leader of your program. Hooperazzi asked about Logan Duncombe. I think, Joel, that we talked about Logan. If he's getting more minutes like the players talked about and improving, that improves our depth. That also, as Ryan said, gets us future down the road when TJD and Race leave. I think that's just going to help us. It's a little bit surprising, but also when guys are going 5-on-5 or 7-on-7, people are going to get a lot of run at different spots in your preseason work. That doesn't always equate to getting time and getting run for that. And then there's 2 more real quick, and I'm going to just let you answer this because you probably know more about the NBA than I do. Terrence Harper asks, how do you guys feel the possibility of NBA doing away with the one and done and going back to drafting 18-year-olds that will affect our program? I know there was a new thing coming out. Can you shed some light on that new decision or possible new decision?
NBA and the Players Association are discussing changing that rule back to allowing high schoolers to come in if they're 18 years old. I think that you're essentially there now because a lot of kids are jumping to the G League and just playing a year there. And you've seen it. Some guys be very successful and get drafted high doing that. So I think you're essentially there now. I don't think it's going to decimate the college game. Some people think it will, but there's only so many draft picks. There's only 2 rounds of the NBA draft. So it's not like you're going to have the top 100 guys jumping to the NBA. You'll have a couple, and it's guys who probably aren't going to get the most out of the college experience anyway because they're leaving after a year. I do like having the best players in college basketball. I also think, though, that some teams are have done away with the spirit of the whole thing of going to college. And when you load up on 7 new one and dones every year to run your team, that's within the rules. It's completely legal, but I also think it kind of ruins the spirit of college basketball, which is guys who stick around and develop. And that's the most fun part of it. And quite frankly, there's a reason teams like Villanova, programs like Villanova wind up consistently being among the best, whereas those one and done schools don't win titles that often. And so I would say that, very rarely are teams full of one and dones winning championships. I think there's something to that. I really do. Agreed. Because it's almost a mercenary culture and it's, again, completely legal. They're allowed to do it. It's just an interesting way to develop your program. And I don't think it pays off in the way they believe it should.
And this is a real interesting question to end on. Jeremy Powlin asked this, how has deep knowledge of basketball helped you in your personal or business life, from networking to parallels of coaching / management / teaching to personal character? What do you implement in your life that is directly related to your love of basketball?
Well, it's directly related to my day job as a sports writer and income. Yes. So I have to dive into that on a near daily basis. No, I think from playing basketball, I developed a lot of life skills. And I think that I've always told my friends that if they have kids, get them in a team sport. If they're really good at golf or tennis or whatever, encourage that, of course. But let them play a team sport at some level, because I think you learn a lot of life skills that you're going to need later. I think working well with others is a big thing. Caring about something other than individual success is another. And being compassionate towards others, because it's on multiple people for you to succeed. I think those are things that I developed the skills that I developed playing a lot of team sports as a kid. And every sport I played was a team sport. I didn't play individual sports. I'm terrible at tennis, golf. Watching me golf, would be a comedy video. I was a baseball, basketball, soccer guy growing up. And I think it really helped me. It helped me sort of socialize and understand that there are things in this world that are bigger than just me being happy. And it's working with a lot of people. And I think that's helped me in the business and work world too, is, relying on other people to help you and being able to ask for help and being able to give help to people who are your teammates. And I think that's a huge life lesson that I think every kid should be exposed to.
Yeah. Team sports are really, really, really important. I think camaraderie and learning to deal with people. This basketball, the love of basketball with the assembly call community, our Delphi bracketology has given me a sense of community. It's actually calmed me down evaluating the games. I don't yell and scream as a fan as I used to. I'd still do every once in a while. I think when you're a leader, you try to find value. The coaching aspect of me, you try to find value in everyone and find what each player can do. Well, you do that as well in your work. You try to help. I just think, not everyone's into sports, but man, I would be lost without following sports. A sense of belonging. The networking aspect, Jeremy, is huge. Knowing people across the country involved in sports and bracketology, being able to sit with a guy from San Diego on a Thursday night is just a lot of there's a lot of enjoyment and a lot of fulfillment. It just makes you feel good. So, you don't have that if you don't have that love of basketball. And I'm sure there are communities around playing bridge or doing other things that you get a sense of community, but sports does allow that. But the coaching aspect, it helps you. You have to be an effective leader, an effective communicator in order to coach. So going through that process hopefully has improved my ability to do that in work, in our assembly call thing. But I couldn't imagine a life without 3 TVs down here and conversation going on and maybe a little betting app on the side, live betting, and just, the meetups, all of those things. I think it keeps me sane. So
it's a fuller life.
Yeah. A lot of purpose in there. So
That's it. We're done. No more questions.
All right, Ryan, we're ready to move on. So that'll do it for this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Thanks to Bob Thompson for producing our music, and thanks to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logos. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next Thursday at our regular time. Until then,
take it from me, Juwan Morgan. Keep your elbows in, eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Hey, the show's over. Here I come, Coach Tonsoni.
Hey, it's a good Thursday night when Mrs. Tonsoni's fired up.
It is. Always is. It's a good any night when she's fired up. We love
That's
that.
right. She's got a new haircut today, so I got to go tell her how good it looks before.
Tell her for us, too. Even though
I
we
will.
can't see it, we know she looks good.
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it. So, all right, everybody, be good. We're real close to some basketball. Hoosier Hysteria in a couple weeks. Get down there if you want to. I'm sure we'll have a show or a report or something about it. So enjoy. Be good.
All right, Coach.
We'll see you.